Okay, and welcome to everyone that's with us this evening. Really nice to see you all. There are some old faces that I think have been with us over the last year and some new faces, so welcome and welcome to Café Scientifique. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Becca Edwards, I'm from Bournemouth University, and the other parts of the Café Scientifique crew that organises every month, we've got Emily, Naomi, Emily, confuse me, two Emilys, I'm not just single two, and Sharon, and every month we try and kind of put this together. For those of you that haven't been to a Café Scientifique before, the general sort of format of the evening kind of works in the following way. Our very special guest speaker will kick off shortly with a talk, and actually this time around she's asked that we just have keep the questions to the discussion section afterwards. So Sue will give us a talk. We're then going to have a short break. Now this is a very exciting break because it's our first birthday as Café Scientifique. So survived a year. So in the break time, as well as obviously being able to buy more drinks and food, we're going to have some birthday cake to celebrate, which is always a highlight, I think, of anyone's day. After our break, we'll open everything up very much for discussion. Just to sort of reiterate that obviously anything goes in terms of discussion. We always say in Café Scientifique, there's no such thing as a stupid question. It's often the questions that perhaps people are too afraid to ask that are really important in terms of kind of research and moving things on. We will be taking some photographs, and as usual we will be filming. If anybody doesn't want to have their face used in any images or anything, please come and let us know and we'll make sure that you sort of don't appear in anything. Please also help us spread the word and start the dialogue digitally. It's been a long day, it's a hard word to say. Using social media. Do like our CAFSci Facebook page. I think if you search on Facebook for Café Scientifique Bournemouth, who is there? On the screen there. Or, there we go. We're also on Twitter, so do kind of tweet using the hashtag CAFSci Boscanova and @CAFSci Bournemouth. So finally, just before I move on to our very exciting guest speaker, as ever, just want to say enormous thanks to the guys here at Boscanova who warmly open up the cafe the first Tuesday of every month for Café Scientifique. It'd be great, please do support them as much as you can by buying their amazing food and drinks to make it worth their while sort of opening the evening. So that brings me on to tonight's guest speaker. Now Sue is very much an independent researcher and a digital pioneer. Back in 1995 she founded the Trace Online Writing Centre, which was an early global online community which actually ran for 10 years and did some really innovative and exciting things. Between 2005 and 2013 she was Professor of New Media in the Institute of Creative Technologies at Bournemouth University, where she researched biophilia, social media, transliteracy, transdisciplinarity and future foresight. And I think it was really interesting talking to Sue. She was really in a lot of these topics, really before anyone else was, before so many of us started thinking about them. She's had a range of books published, including Technobiophilia, did I say that right? Yeah, well done. Which I will just do a quick plug for here, because unusually we actually have some available for sale. So if you want one of these, please do come up and we can sort that out. And that really is a study of the impact of the natural world on digital culture. And now, Hello World, Travels in Virtuality, a travelogue memoir of the online, and Correspondence, which is actually shortlisted for the Arthur C. Clarke Award for the best science fiction novel. So multi-talented. East Midlands Loss is very much Boscombe's game. Sue has recently joined us here in Bournemouth, which is obviously, or here in Boscombe, which is obviously the best place on the earth. And tonight her talk is going to tell us all about how nature calms our wildlife. So can I hand over to Sue? Thank you.
First thing I need to do is just move escape. Somebody just. Sorry about this.
It's down at the bottom, it's already open. Do you see?
Yeah, hang on. Don't see it. That's just not going. That's what we want. Yeah, we've got. Right. Well, thanks very much. It's really exciting to be here on your first anniversary. Over the years I've been to a couple of Café Scientifiques, one years ago that was in Nottingham, and then there was one in Leicester, and now I come to Boscombe and there's one here, so fantastic. So I'm here really to talk about this particular book, Technobiophilia, which just came out last week. And so this is part of the publicity for it. And actually the very last page is set on Boscombe Beach. But what I'm going to talk about today is really a kind of a snapshot of some of the ideas in the book. It's got a lot of detail and a lot of research in it, so I've tried to hone it down to something that's kind of easy to digest in the short time that we have. So I hope that you'll kind of go along with me with the ideas of it. So we're starting off with a picture. This is me in Second Life. I'm not very good in Second Life, and at this point I was actually trying to paddle in this river, and I ended up just kind of standing in it and couldn't do anything else. But that's where I kind of started off. So, and this is a copy of the book, Technobiophilia, Nature and Cyberspace, and I'll explain how I came to that kind of slightly unusual title as we go along. So it started off really with a search for metaphors of nature in cyberspace. I've got this book here, Hello World, Travels in Virtuality. This came out in 2004. And it was very much my personal journey as a wired person, but also somebody obviously involved in the physical world as well. And Hello World ended up being a kind of personal memoir or travelogue of my life in cyberspace. So that was published 2004, and at that point I thought, well, I wonder if I'm the only person who has this sense of the physical and the virtual being all kind of mixed up. So I started to look around, and I looked particularly at metaphors of nature that we use in cyberspace. And I started to collect them, and I had a big spreadsheet. So obviously we have metaphors like surfing. If we're in computing, we have fields and routes, we have Twitter streams, we have viruses and swarms and webs and, you know, lots of them. So I started to collect them until I got quite a big spreadsheet of different metaphors used in cyberspace or cyber culture. I had no idea why they were there though. And then I started looking at some of the ways in which that's kind of manifest in the way that we in the way that, if you like, the geek community interacts with nature and technology. So this is a set of pictures that were done actually by my sister, who's an artist, and each one of them forms a plate at the beginning of each chapter of Technobiophilia. So they're all an actual laptop in different kinds of positions. So this one, for example, comes from the fact that I found in my research that a lot of geeks like to go camping. We've all heard, you know, the idea of bar camps and food camps and places where people go away for the weekend and spend their time usually camping, eating pizza, drinking Coke or beer and coding. So there's a big camping culture. I wrote an essay called When Geeks Go Camping. This picture here is actually about the relationship between Thoreau's Walden, that's in Thoreau's hut in the woods in Walden. And many of the people who talk about cyber culture often will refer to Thoreau. And obviously this one is about bugs. So I got to the point where I'd found all these metaphors in cyberspace. I knew they were there. I knew people were doing them. I'd interviewed a lot of people in the history of technology, the history of the internet, and people involved currently in computer culture. So lots of evidence, but no reason as to why all this was there. And then after about 6 years of collecting metaphors and getting a bit desperate because I had a book contract but no answer, I came across biophilia. How many people here have actually heard of biophilia? Just a couple. It was completely new to me. In my kind of search, I'd ended up looking at papers from the environmental psychology community, and I was following the footnotes and the references, trying to find concepts that made sense to me. And that's how I came across lots of references to biophilia. So the story of biophilia is that the word itself was actually coined by Erich Fromm, but he never really made much use of it or developed it. It was then taken up by E.O. Wilson, a very well-known biologist, and published in a book called Biophilia in 1984. But Wilson's journey towards biophilia actually had begun 10 years earlier, when he was in the jungle in Suriname. This is the kind of jungle picture, I don't know if it's Suriname. And he was researching ants. And he was out in the jungle one day when he had that sudden moment, that sudden sense that you often get when you're out in wild nature, of suddenly realising how small and inconsequential you are, how small humans are in the long, long history of this planet, which had been going on a long, long time before humans even started to evolve. And this very intense moment of him realising two things really. One is that we are so insignificant in the wider ecology, and we'll never understand the wild world around us. And the second thing is that despite that, we long to be part of it, that it's kind of coded into our DNA, that we want to be part of the natural world. So he called that biophilia, the love of nature, and he defined it as the innate tendency, and he said innate because he believes it's genetically passed on, the innate tendency to focus on life and life-like processes. And I read that and I thought, that's what it is. That's what's going on. When we go into cyberspace and we say, I'm in a chat room, I'm surfing through the net, I'm travelling around, etc., we are actually trying to describe cyberspace as if it were a real place with real, quote, natural features. So, having picked up on this notion of biophilia and thinking that that was possibly the answer, I then started to look into some other related areas from environmental psychology. So before I explain what those are, a quick question. I'm just wondering how many of you here actually already use nature images, say as a screensaver on your laptop or a wallpaper on your phone? Put your hand up if you do. I know I do. Okay, thanks. So, a majority of people, we're already putting nature on our phones or on our laptops, and I hope that this talk's going to tell you why you do that. So, what I came across in my search was some work by Rachel and Stephen Kaplan in a book called The Experience of Nature, which is incredibly difficult to get hold of, and you can buy it on Amazon, I think, but second-hand copies cost a fortune. But it's a really important book. And they were environmental psychologists who did a lot of work studying people. This has nothing to do with technology. They were out in the field, often studying people who were doing kind of outward bound trips and things like that. And they were looking at the way that they interacted with nature. And it was very important to them that they work with ordinary people, not specialist nature people. What they were looking for was to try and find out what do ordinary people like about nature, what are their preferences, why do they like it, rather than get some kind of expert opinion about, why the outdoors is good for you. They just wanted to know, well, what was it that pleased people about nature? And they came up with this notion of nearby nature being very important. And this is one of the reasons, I suspect, why you might have a picture of a waterfall on your desktop. They said that what nearby nature is about is something that gives you a sense that nature is nearby. It could be a green window view. It could be a dusty, dirty tree in the middle of a city. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Often these things are not beautiful, they're quite mundane, but they're a suggestion that nature is not forgotten, that you're not in a concrete jungle, but that nature is literally nearby. And there was some very interesting research done into this, which was then repeated in lots of different ways, but the kind of key, the core story, is some research that was done into gallstone patients recovering in a hospital. Half of them, gallbladder removal, half of them were put into wards which just had a view of a brick wall from the window, and the other half were put into wards that had a view something like this, a fairly mundane green view. And it was very clear that those with this mundane green view recovered more quickly, required less pain treatment, required less attention from the nurses, and generally their convalescence was much improved compared with the people with the brick wall. Very simple experiment, which was then repeated in schools, in prisons, in offices, and the same results came up time and time again, that even this small suggestion of nature made them feel better, and was measurably better. So this started to feed into my notion of this thing of why are we bringing nature into cyberspace? Well, because it's biophilia, we're attracted to things that seem to be like life or lifelike processes, and that could be your screensaver, or it could be the pictures that you enjoy on Facebook that either you share or your friend puts up a picture of a flower they've seen and people like it. We enjoy it, we get pleasure from it. What they then developed from their research was what they called restorative settings. And they came up with this theory called attention restoration theory, ART. Now, when they were talking about attention, we're talking about 1989, the book came out. It was kind of pre-internet culture era. So they weren't talking about the kind of attention that we worry about now, that, computers are distracting our attention all the time. They were just thinking generally of, for example, people who might work in an office, work long hours, be struggling writing papers or doing accounts or whatever. That kind of attention, not particularly computer-focused attention. But of course it's really relevant to us now, and we live in an attention economy. A lot of people worry that that their attention is constantly being distracted by other things, so attention is really important. So the settings that they came up with to restore our attention, or to heal problems, or I like to say soothe our connected minds, had nothing to do with computers then, but now I think they do. So these are the restorative settings they came up with. One they called being away, in which the setting is physically or conceptually different from your usual environment. This could be a very short moment. One example they suggest is that, if you're working very hard, you're sitting at your desk or reading, why not take 5 minutes? And the example they give is to go out into the garden and check all the new buds on the plants, and just wander around and pick a few dead leaves off, and take that time out, a setting physically or conceptually different from what you're used to, your usual environment. So they call that being away. Extent, a setting sufficiently rich and coherent that it engages the mind and promotes exploration. Again, this is a bit like, you're going into a different, almost frame of mind, being taken away from your hard work, and perhaps being made curious or getting a sense of something larger than you, and I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. Fascination, soft and hard. Soft fascination and hard fascination. And these they described as content or mental processes that engage your attention effortlessly and allow you to rest your mind. And hard fascination, they would describe as things that you can't tear your eyes away from. You're fascinated by watching whatever it might be. It could be people, doing something in the street, or I guess it could be a TV program or theatre, or something that's really gripped your attention. You're not perhaps deeply intellectually engaged with it. It could be sport, I guess, but you're intensely focused on it. Or soft fascination, which could be things like watching fish in an aquarium. And the example I always give to that is that I've got an app on my phone which is a koi carp swimming around in a pool, and I can mess around with it and I can tickle the fish and make them move around and so on. Somebody did an experiment with aquaria where in a dentist's office a group of psychologists brought an aquarium into a dentist's waiting room, left it there for a period of time, and then they would take it out again, and then they would measure the responses of the patients with or without the aquarium. And apparently the patients with the aquarium generally were calmer when they went into the dentist's treatment room. They resisted less, they required less pain medication, they were more cooperative, whereas the poor patients without the aquarium were, a bit more wound up. So again, this was repeated several times with different groups of people. And it was just this thing of soft fascination. Just watching the aquarium would take their minds away from their anxiety. And then the last setting is compatibility. I find this the most difficult one to understand. They described it as a good fit between your inclinations and the kinds of activities in that setting. And I've decided for myself that what that means in terms of internet culture is something about the things that you like to do that you can do online, that absorb your practical imagination. So I'm thinking it could be perhaps people who like to design or code, kind of craft activity online, something that makes them relax, perhaps that develops some flow, creative flow. But as I say, that's quite a bit harder to understand than the others. So altogether, this was the art attention restoration theory before the age of computers. So how does that match up with what I'd been finding in my research? Well, I've got some examples for you here. How art works in our connected lives. So, for example, the sense of being away. This is another app that I used to have on my phone, but they don't make it for Android, but you can get it for iPhones. And that's a very nice Zen garden. So I don't know if you can read that from here, but it has a daily saying, and this one is, "Do not speak unless it improves on silence." Same saying, and then you read that and then you click OK. And you can go into this little app and you can rake the gravel around, you can move the plants. Depending on how much you pay to upgrade, you can get more and more complicated features for your Zen garden. You can get quite a lot of different Zen garden apps, but this is actually, I can't remember the name of it, this is definitely the nicest, and it's Apple only, which is very disappointing. So that kind of activity, I think, I would say is part of being away. It's part of that time that we spend on our computer when we're kind of absent-mindedly engaging in that sort of activity. Another one might be going on Farmville and picking your tomatoes or whatever. The sense of extent, the sense of being part of something bigger. The slide I've got there is just for the information superhighway, because a lot of the ways that we think about the web or the internet is about actually moving through it and around it. Many metaphors related to that, and just in our general everyday speech we talk about going into a chat room, onto Facebook. In the early days of the web there was a lot of discourse about the web, or rather the internet, being a territory that you colonised, and that even led to John Perry Barlow writing a declaration of independence of cyberspace, where he said to the government, you might govern our physical bodies, but you can't govern our virtual bodies because they don't exist, and we're free to move around our virtual world. So there's a lot to do with extent in the way that we just think about our presence online. Soft fascination, I mentioned the app on the phone. Again, lots of activities which just kind of take your mind away from the task in hand. You know yourself what kinds of things you like to do to relax on your computer. I mean, I used to actually really enjoy relaxing by doing spreadsheets, but that's probably a bit sad. But you do too. And compatibility. Again, this sense of almost a kind of physical space that feels right for us. The picture that I've used there, I wasn't quite sure what to use for this. I don't know if you're familiar with Howard Rheingold, who's a kind of one of the, called a cyberspace guru or whatever. He's been around for a very long time, writes about online community and so on. He has his office in his garden. He lives in California, so he can do that. And he has a chair where he likes to sit and work in his garden, which he calls his outdoor office. But lately, I don't know if you can see that, he's actually built himself a stand-up desk, because this is the trend now. It's healthier to have a stand-up desk. So now he's got his garden chair, which is a bit like a throne, and then in front of it he's got his stand-up desk with his laptop on top of it, where he can stand and work in his garden. So he's finding a physical way to be comfortable being both online and in nature at the same time. So there are a few ideas from me about how attention restoration theory operates in our connected lives, sometimes subconsciously, and sometimes because, you know, like with Howard's outdoor office, you actually make a decision to try and make that work for you. So, okay, in terms of time, I'm doing okay. I've got just a few slides about what you can do in relation to this. And this comes from the book. I did a section at the end with, you know, if you've followed the book through and if you accept my arguments, then you'll get to the end of the book and you'll say, well, okay, if I buy all of this, what can I do to improve my life? And a few suggestions from the book here. So things that you can do indoors. Pay attention to the view from your window. It sounds a small thing, but it's so easy for us to just get stuck into staring at our screens and forgetting that actually there is a world out there. And there's some quite interesting theory about what should be in the view beyond your window. I looked before at the nearby nature idea of even just a boring view of a few dull, dusty trees is actually therapeutic. But there are also issues about the actual shape of the window, which I go into in the book. So be aware of the view from your window. I actually came up with that in the end because I realised that I hadn't done it myself. And I was staring past my computer through a window in the place where I was living at the time, into a kind of yard, which was actually really not very nice to look at. And so when I looked up, it didn't give me any respite, it just made me want to look back at my computer again. So I arranged everything in the yard so that my view was actually pleasant, so that when I did look away from my computer to think, I could look at a more enjoyable view. Similarly with indoor plants, to think about placing them. There's lots of research about certain plants that are good to have in offices and home situations because they clean the air and so on. There's also the fact that you can, you know, look after them and tend them and water them and prune them and so on, and build that into your computer day, if you like, that kind of engagement with real living nature in your home space. Connecting with animals as well is very biophilic in terms of, again, taking you more into the natural world and removing you from the cerebral abstract world. And treat yourself to some biophilic computer kit, and I'll come back to that right at the end. That's a mouse that I've got from Urban Factory, which is made of wood and it's got a beautiful blue light in it. It's a real pleasure to look at and to feel some wood beneath your hand instead of the usual kind of grubby plastic. Again, these are all tiny, tiny things, but they connect you more with the natural world. Yesterday, I should say, I did an interview for the BBC radio programme Click that's on the World Service, and Gareth Mitchell, who interviewed me, the presenter, he said, yeah, but some people actually don't want that. They just really like all the plastic and glass and metal. And that's fine. I mean, I do too, but this is another way to integrate some of those ideas. What you can do outdoors, well, you could try going outside. That's quite a novel idea for some of us who sit staring at a screen all day. Even if you just go outside for 5 or 10 minutes, it will make a big difference to your desk-bound life. Create an outdoor office like Howard's out in the garden. I tried doing this in my last house, but the trouble was with the English weather, you take all that time. I kind of had a bench and I put beautiful plants around it, sensory lavenders and all kinds of things, and then it was always either too hot or too cold, and it just didn't work. We need to be in California for that, really. Grow stuff, again, a small thing, but even just growing things, even if you're growing things indoors, again, you're engaging, you're touching with plants. And think about, well, when was the last time you actually did that? A lot of you are probably gardeners and are quite used to doing this. But if you don't have a garden and you don't have many houseplants, you will be seldom actually touching soil or touching green living things. Use your smartphone to enhance your outdoor experience. There are loads of smartphone apps that can help. First half hour gone. Okay, thank you. I'm nearly done. There are loads of smartphone apps. People use them to go geocaching, looking for hidden treasure together, things that help you find out where you are, things that help you find out where the stars are. Lots of apps to enhance your outdoor experience. It's not a question of turning off your machine and going outdoors. I absolutely don't advocate that. I want to find ways to bring all these together. This picture is from Paris, and it's actually called a digital staircase, which is a bit of a strange name. But basically, it's in the middle of the street, and it's a little wireless point. And you can go and sit there and either check in, log in with your own equipment, or you can use their equipment, and they've got this massive kind of pseudo phone image there. And the idea is to be actually outdoors and yet connected in the middle of the street. What you can do online, visit a virtual world. If you start thinking about it, then you might already be a game player, and you'll know that there are absolutely tons of games that have a very nature-focused world, often games where people can build their own and cultivate their own land as well within the game. World of Warcraft has some amazing landscapes. Play a video game. I've picked one out here called Flower, but there are quite a few games like Flower which are designed, although they don't use the term biophilia, they are offering a biophilic experience deliberately. They're not familiar with the theory. Sample some Next Nature. There's a really interesting website called the Next Nature Network, which is all about kind of enhanced nature mixed up with technology, new kinds of nature. Just a different way to think about it, really. Add biophilic design to your online spaces. I've got another slide about that too. There is a whole field of what's called biophilic design, where architects and designers take the biophilic principles of wanting to be close to nature and they apply them to buildings. So the buildings that you see that have turf roofs or new kinds of architectural design that has these walls of plants coming down, or green views, or lots of water features and so on, lots of wood. If you Google biophilic design, you'll find a massive range of architectural and interior and exterior designs, usually for cities, using biophilia. But why don't we have those with our virtual environments? Why don't we have that with our hardware? Like, as I said, the mouse is a good example, the wooden mouse, of biophilic design in hardware. But there's very little of it. So, just concluding really with a couple of slides. So I think the tech industry really needs biophilic design. Here's a beautiful biophilic house built, as you can see, kind of in the hillside, very much part of the environment. Why can't we think about our technology kit in that kind of way? Why can't we think about our software design in that way? I don't have it with me today, but I've got a lovely video filmed in a forest in Japan, which is actually an advert. You can see it on my website. It's an advert for a mobile phone made of wood. You know, people want those experiences, and the industry is not giving them to them. I think there's a fantastic business opportunity here. So pay attention to the biophilic needs of tech workers. A lot of Silicon Valley companies do this already. They let you take your dog in, they build rambling walks around the campus, they have biophilic features and so on. They provide yoga rooms and all kinds of places for meditation and so on. The tech workers really have got biophilic needs that are at the moment kind of subsumed in all the plastic and glass, and apply biophilic principles to hardware and software design. So finally, we're supposed to be Silicon Beach here. I think we need to think in a techno-biophilic way. So we're looking at, if you remember, biophilia was the attraction, innate attraction to life and lifelike processes. Technobiophilia, a word I invented, which is a bit clumsy but still, is about being attracted to life and lifelike processes in technology. Technobiophilia. And I think we've got a great opportunity to do that here. There's a whole area of biophilia research which is about the sea and our relationship with the sea. It's called the blue gin. We should be thinking in terms of combining the blue gin research with our Silicon Beach ideas. So building a kind of techno-biophilic industry that can offer people who come to Bournemouth to work in tech something they're not going to get at Silicon Roundabout, which is a biophilic blue gin experience. And that's the end.
Thank you very much, Sue. A very interesting talk. As Becca said to you before, we'll just take a short break so that you can refill your glasses, and we're going to have some very special birthday cake. Yay! You chose the right night to come along.
And I say about my books.
Yes, of course, sorry.
I just brought along with me 2 copies of this, which is £2, and there's 2 copies left of Technobiophilia, but that's 12 quid.
Okay, so and if any of you are interested, please come and have a look at the books. We will resume in about 10-15 minutes, and so have some ideas of what sort of questions you're going to ask. And let's get some interesting discussion going. Thank you. Thank you.